Before we get to the meat and potatoes of the video, I think it's important to discuss something in the beginning, namely the concept of gaslighting, because as we get into the meat and potatoes of the video, we will inevitably encounter the concept of gaslighting as it actually is. So therefore, at the outset, it's important to discuss it. Now, these days, gaslighting is misused constantly, and words do change meaning, but frequently you'll hear something like, he was gaslighting me, and what's meant by that is he was insulting you. When in reality, gaslighting means making a deliberate attempt to convince somebody that they were imagining something, that they're losing their grasp on reality. A very simple example of this might be, for example, it's raining outside. You go outside and you get wet, and you go back in, you take your umbrella so you don't get wet anymore, and somebody says, "Why are you taking an umbrella?" And you say, "Well, it's raining outside. I don't want to get wet again." And they say, "It's not raining." And then 3 other people come along and say, "Why are you taking an umbrella? It's not raining." And you're already wet and you know it's raining. And so they're trying to convince you in this hypothetical scenario that you're hallucinating the rain, that you're not actually wet, this sort of thing. You're being gaslit at the end of the day. And that's what that means. So having explored that, it's important to launch into the topic. And the topic of today is why we all insist on pretending. And increasingly, I've come to the conclusion that all this pretense, all this make-believe that we engage in, might, in certain respects, do far more harm than good. A classic example of this might be the sub-5 incel, right? The sub-5 incel who's also short, right? So he's a 4 maybe, he's below average height, maybe he's 5'4", and this is obviously a real obstacle in his life, and he makes an effort and he tries, and people just tell him, "Oh, you're not trying enough." And he says, "Well, I've noticed that people treat me more poorly because I'm unattractive and I'm short." And they say, "Oh, it has nothing to do with that. It's nothing to do with the fact that you're ugly and short. It's to do with your posture or your personality or the way you're dressing or carrying yourself. It has nothing to do with these physical dimensions that you suffer from. It's all in your head." And the incel guy is saying to himself, maybe because he's isolated, he's not yet aware of these things, maybe they're right. Am I just imagining that people are treating me poorly because I'm excessively unattractive and short? So he keeps on trying, and he puts on better clothing and tries to be friendly and engaging and open-minded, and nothing changes. And then he goes exploring online and looks at the internet and then realizes, there are other short, unattractive guys out there with exactly the same problem, and they've been told the exact same malarkey as I've been told. I actually think there's something to this. Is everyone gaslighting me? Well, yes, they are, Mr. Incel, in this case. They are. They're claiming that your difficulties in life have nothing to do with your appearance, whether height or facial appearance. Now, there might be other things that are interfering, but we all know the halo effect is very real, at least those of us who've looked into it and observe it. And so, yes, in this case, Mr. Incel, you have been gaslit. But you see, there's actually a greater gaslighting afoot here, gentlemen. And that is this notion that we all need to pretend that things are a certain way because, allegedly, it makes people feel better about themselves. That's why we're pretending, right, to Mr. Incel, that he's just imagining it all. It has nothing to do with his physical limitations and disabilities. It's something else. It's magic. And this goes to the heart of our entire societal setup. We talk about things like inherent value or value before the law, right? Each one of us allegedly has the exact same value. We have human inherent value, both in a metaphorical sense and in a social sense. When we present ourselves before a court or are applying to a job, none of these things ultimately matter except our ultimate human value. Oh, wait, no. There are differences. Maybe if you're tall and attractive or have a better CV or just generally more competent, you'll get the job. But hey, the fact that Bob there got the job and you didn't has nothing to do with your inherent value. Because even if you're a bum on the street, you still have quote-unquote inherent value. You know how long I've heard this term? All my life? And every time I heard that term, I knew that the term that people wantonly bandy about did not map onto reality, and that it belied everything I had experienced, observed, and could confirm as being true. There are countless examples of this. We all know the model citizen and famous 21st century philosopher Jeremy Meeks, who's now world famous, a model, an actor, etc., etc. Why? Well, he looked pretty good in a mugshot. There are studies out there that indicate that judges in courts, the measure of their sentencing depend on whether or not they've eaten lunch. And maybe we shouldn't call that a cognitive bias. Maybe we should call that a gastrointestinal bias, although it definitely covers both domains. But we have loads of cognitive biases. Casey Anthony, remember, I think 2008 or 9, she killed her own daughter, put her own daughter in the boot of a car, and she got off scot-free. Are we all equal before the law? No, we're not. Do we all have inherent value? If we do have inherent value, then the world certainly does not reflect that whatsoever. It seems to me an empty platitude that people love talking about to make themselves feel good and to try to convince other people to feel good about themselves. But the reality is that it fails. It fails time and again. This pretense that we all have inherent value. No, we don't. We have the value accorded to us by our genes and environment, which then translate into actions and other things that people can observe, and consequently, they will attribute certain values to us. The bum on the street has no value in the eyes of the many. He's neither attractive nor accomplished, and so whatever his inherent value, as he languishes and wastes away on the street, doesn't really matter, because he's not feeling anything along the lines of inherent value. Elon Musk has a lot of money, so his inherent value is tied to his cognitive abilities and his massive wealth. Jeremy Meeks has quote-unquote inherent value because he's a really good-looking guy. No, in actual practice, we have absolutely no inherent. We have the value assigned to us based on the luck and lottery of life. How smart you are, how attractive you are, how wealthy you are, how none of these things you are, right? These are the factors that determine whether or not you will have quote-unquote value, because inherent value isn't a thing. Relationships are yet another domain where people go on and on about the magic of love. But relationships are purely transactional. Whether it involves money, looks, personality, it doesn't really matter. It's all transactional. And if you fail to live up to your part of the transaction, you can get the boot very easily. It's a constant tug of war between the people there. If the man starts losing money, the woman gets antsy. If the woman gets really fat, the man might want to boink somebody else, especially if she started off slim and attractive. And so, inherent value? No. There are different degrees of value, and it's all randomly distributed, and some people really luck out, and some people really don't, with everything in between. And we're at a juncture right now with the internet, with all this knowledge available online, with the power of quote-unquote noticing things that run contrary to claims made widely in public and widely by society, that people end up running against a wall. It is basically pure gaslighting to tell the mass of humanity, or say American society, that we all have dignity and human value, when there are people right now that have never felt a single ounce of any of those things, because their mother was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and their father was a violent criminal that beat them. And because they grow up in that environment, inherent in the same genes, they end up in the same situation. They know nothing about dignity or value, no matter what you tell them. They've never experienced it. Now, you could say they should be treated as if they have inherent value, but nobody does that. Where do they do that? Our value comes from what we can do for others. Even if that value is just some kind of aesthetic visual effect, like, oh my God, he's so good looking, she's so good looking. That's still providing quote-unquote aesthetic value. And to the fortunate individual who gets to boink such an attractive person, that's another aspect of value gained. And therefore I pose the question, must we continue with this pretense? Must we pretend for the sake of everybody and not look past this tissue-thin papier-mâché facade that we've erected around ourselves, lying to each other nonstop about things that just aren't true, like inherent value, which is basically like saying the sky isn't blue, or that it's not raining when it is, or that attractive people aren't treated better, or that smart people typically are not more successful than dumber people. I really think at this stage, the jig is up. And inasmuch as the jig is not up, people should really consider dropping the masquerade. Because I guarantee you, getting gaslit does not make you feel better. It doesn't make you feel better for people to tell you things are a certain way when you know manifestly, based on your own experiences, as well as observational data gathered through the experiences of many other people, as well as actual scientific studies in some cases, see the halo effect, That's all BS. People are lying through their teeth to protect some kind of sacred value that's not even there to begin with, that ultimately ends up hurting people more than it helps. Because everyone's afraid that if the mask were to fall for just a second, everyone would wake up and, I don't know, they would riot or something. No, many people know this is BS. It's this notion about inherent value and inherent dignity and blah, 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 blah. Even if we truly wanted to, it's impossible to make notions like that actionable. Way too many cognitive biases. Absolutely impossible. So wouldn't it be better just to level with people and say, look, it is this way, it sucks, and we acknowledge that. I'll give you a good example. Let me bring up Sir Petey the Punani Slayer, the pimpifying ginger of Brooklyn, the scion of Dagda, who now has found himself a woman. Now, I made a video about this, but he made the point in the video that he's hyper aware that him getting this relationship was pure luck, and that it would have been much, much harder if he had been much shorter and much less attractive. He is hyper aware of the reality that undergirds our society. And so he's not going to go around telling some 5'4" guy with a recessed jaw and balding with no real skills, do exactly what I do. It's so easy. No. And in turn, he shows compassion, sympathy, and understanding to those who are less fortunate than him. That's the way it should be done, which is why Sir Petey the Pimpalicious Punani Slayer is such a great guy. No one is helping anybody by perpetuating this lie of inherent value, of human dignity. Yes, it would be nice if it were true, but it is manifestly not true. So we should accept that we have these cognitive biases. We should accept that we act upon them, and in doing so, we should be honest with the people we would otherwise lie to. Because the lies hurt more than they help. The lies are gaslighting. If you're a person who struggles in life, there's a very high probability that you were not given certain gifts through no fault of your own, and someone coming along telling you that you're just not trying hard enough, assuming that you are trying, or that you're not working hard enough, assuming you're putting in some work, that despite all these efforts, you're not yielding fruit, that there's something fundamentally wrong with you, or the goalposts will be shifted, and they'll say you're not doing enough, because it's never enough, right? It's never enough until you actually succeed, despite whatever inherent limitations you might have. How do you feel about that? No, you don't like being gaslit. Nobody does. It's horrible. And we have a mass delusion here that involves gaslighting the entirety of society. Enough of it. It doesn't work. It makes things worse. Let's stop doing it. Anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in. Many special thanks to my patrons and my donors on PayPal. You guys are the best. You keep the channel going. Without you, the channel could not persist. And if you can engage in the usual YouTube jazz of liking the video, sharing the video, leaving a comment, subbing if you're not yet a sub, be much appreciated. If I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. Until then, may the gods watch over you. Bye-bye for now. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.